Hey y'all. I'm gonna do a Faith Friday video tomorrow too on a different topic, but this was fresh in my mind, so I'm gonna talk about it. My opinion that pastors should not have social media. I am a pastor's daughter, if you didn't know. I've been in several different churches of several different kinds, size, capacity, legalism, Christian light, the whole nine yards, right? And yeah, my perspective is that pastors should not have social media. Where does this come from? Well, in the past, I would say like 5 or 6 years, we've seen scandal after scandal after scandal of pastors falling into the trap of lovers of self and engaging in behavior that is really reprobate, engaging in conversations with people on social media that they should not, engaging in rhetoric that they should not. And by pastors, I mean people who are actually like actively leading a flock. I'm not talking about your social media pastors or like, I don't know what you want to call them, like evangelists, I guess. That's a different thing. But if you are shepherding a flock, your main goal should be shepherding your flock. It should not be you being on social media, figuring out who likes your stuff and who does not. Unfortunately, I think that a lot of pastors, because this is a new phenomenon. Of course, social media it's been around, but it's a relatively new phenomenon, right? Like it's relatively new that you can have access to millions and millions of people's perceptions of you, opinions of you, and their admiration of you. The flip side of that is their hatred for you or their despise for you. Um, but with pastors, if you guys have been in church for any time, y'all know there's always those people who like they got mental issues, right? They got mental problems and they fall in love with their pastors, right? And they fall in love with the idea of being part of ministry. And in a church setting, like when there's a physical church, it's really hard to like have access to a pastor, right? Like you can't always just like talk to them and they're busy. You have to make sure that their phone is actually on. Like y'all, I could barely get a hold of my dad. Like I gotta like call him. He's like, I don't know, I can't all these text messages, I can't. So you can barely get a hold of my dad. And he is not on social media. Now he has a social media person that does like church stuff, but he's not engaging in social media. And so, but I think what happens is that whole like, ooh, as a pastor, which does happen, like y'all, we have to be honest. I hate that we're not honest. There's this like infatuation with men of God, and these some of these women, not blaming the women because men also have an issue in this, but there is this sort of like, and men actually, men and women have this sort of affinity for pastors and men of God and women and so forth. And so recently another pastor was caught up in an affair, and social media is involved. And so what happens is that now, because you can see everybody and everybody can see you and you have access, all it takes is for you to scroll through social media, and now you're seeing messages from people that you would have never spoken to otherwise, that you would have had to actively go out and attach to and attract, which you cannot do if you're busy preaching and teaching and studying and all that. And so I think that pastors should not have social media. Now, one could argue, well, they should just have more self-control. So part of being wise, my husband and I are taking this class at church right now for biblical counseling and biblical discipleship, and we're learning about the importance of preventing sins, right? Like, how do I prevent it instead of being reactive? How do I prevent it from happening? I don't want to have to rely on my self control. I do not want to have to rely on, am I going to have enough willpower to deny this temptation? Right? I don't want to deal with that. So, what do? I make sure that I stay away from temptation. So, if you are a man on social media and you are like your DMs are open, you're not staying away from temptation. I can tell you that right now. You're not. You're not avoiding temptation. And I think a lot of these pastors either like, I don't think anybody wakes up and just says, "Okay, I wanna cheat on my wife or I wanna cheat on my husband." It takes time, but that door is open when you allow people to communicate with you freely, and then you're looking at things that you shouldn't be looking at as a married man or as a man of the cloth, as they call it, because you are when you should be spending time in the Word or spending time with your family or spending time with people in your flock who actually need help, but instead you're spending time communicating with someone on social media. So I don't think that pastors should have social media. I think that if they want to have a personal page, they need to have a person who is trustworthy, who is also God fearing, someone who has good discernment to run that page, right? So if they want to clip a bunch of sermons and edit them and put them on the page, perfect. If this person hears them say something in a sermon and then types it up in a caption for them, perfect. But I don't think pastors belong on social media. I think it's a trap unless they have safeguards up, like, okay, my DMs are off. My wife, not even just my wife, y'all. My wife, my elders, my deacons all have the passwords. How many pastors do y'all think would actually keep their social media if that was the case? Just a question. I just want to know. How many pastors do y'all think would actually keep their social media if that was the case? Because my perception is that if you are a pastor of a flock, your main goal should not be on social media. It should not be to spread stuff on social media. Your goal should be to tend to your flock. That means your flock is local, which means you could drive to Miss Daisy's house and make sure that she has food. You can minister to Brother Brown, right, at the convalescent home, right? You can have a meeting with, your ministers and with your missionaries and your ministry leaders and say, okay, what are we doing for the jails? What are we doing for the poor? What are we doing for the domestic shelter? Like, those are the kinds of things that you can be doing and that you should be doing. Or how about spending time with your grandchildren or your children or your wife? Like, those are things that you should be tending to, not your social media. And that is just my perspective, having been in multiple churches. I don't think pastors should have social media. I think it's a distraction. I think it's an unwise decision. I think it allows us to see they have too much two-way communication with random people. And especially if there's someone who's flying, then it's like, oh, I'm in your city. Because that's how these things happen. I'd love to meet you. And if so here's my other thing. If you're having an affair with somebody on social media, that means you're probably not, something's not right in the home, right? So fix your issue at home instead of running to social media. See, it used to be harder than that, right? It used to be harder than that because you used to have to cheat with somebody who was in the town. You used to have to cheat with somebody who everybody else knew. Do you see what I'm saying? So it was harder for people to, mess around. But I think the sad part is, this is what nobody really wants to say, and which I'll say it, is it was only a matter of time, right? So it was only a matter of time. If you have that in your heart, this is one thing that God is revealing to me perfectly right now, is like, you better be so diligent in your Bible reading, in your prayer, to heed off of temptation. Heed off temptation. Because if it's anywhere in your heart, all it takes is an opportunity. All it takes is the right circumstance, the perfect storm. And the perfect storm will be, oh, I'm just got into an argument with my wife. I'm flying on a plane. I'm scrolling through social media. This girl is promising to meet up with me, and boom. Or this guy's promising to meet up with me, and boom. That's all it takes. And so I think if a pastor is wise, they are going to allow someone else to manage their social media, and they are not going to be on that thing. They're going to have extreme restrictions around it. And I think the best way to remove yourself from this temptation is to not have it. I think there are millions of other things that you can do locally instead of being in social media. And the thing is that I think a lot of this is the root of all evil, the love of money. I think a lot of this has to do with the love of money, because if you love money, you're going to try and find ways to make as much money as possible. And one of those ways is on social media. Let's just keep it a buck. Let's just be honest, right? And so I think a lot of these pastors love money and fame more than they love preaching, more than they love the word. And I can see how you get to that point. Like, I have to be honest. I can see how people get to that point because it's so easy. It's so easy to fall if you're not careful, if you're not careful. So yeah, I don't think pastors and things should be having social media. Argue, you can disagree with me. You just have to disagree with me respectfully. I don't think that we have the evolutionary tools yet because it's so rapid. Like, we don't have the tools to ward off this kind of temptation. I don't think we have it, that skill set yet. Um, and so yeah, I think it needs to be a no-no. Anyway, I just want to do a quick live stream on that. Uh, I don't think pastors should have social media at all. And I think the one thing that I'm also realizing too for myself is like, I'm not DMing anybody or like I'm not doing none of that, you know. And thankfully, okay, before I go. So when I was younger, I was competing. I was doing like bodybuilding shows, like bikini shows, and I was a lot more photos of me were in like posing and in a bikini and stuff. And I did get a lot of like messages and stuff. And so now that I've like closed up my page, so to speak, where I don't really have that stuff going on anymore, I don't get as much. But you better believe that if you have the allure, if you have the perception of fame and notoriety, that there are women who and men who will try and thwart that. And I think pastors need to be vigilant about that. They need to be vigilant about the fact that the enemy is out here seeking to devour, and you as a pastor need to actually understand that that enemy is also out there for you. I think a lot of pastors just think that they don't really care. They're like, or they don't think that it's going to happen to them. And I'm like, since when? My good sir David, my good sir David did it without social media. You know what I mean? Good sir David figured out how to get that without it since the beginning of time. And so a lot of pastors don't think they need to protect themselves, and they do. All right, you guys. I'll see you guys tomorrow for Faith Friday. I'm not really sure what I want to talk about. I have a couple different ideas for health and fitness on Faith Friday, but I'll let you guys know. Please don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Leave your comments below. I'm so curious what y'all think.